Hello everybody and welcome to the DSLR Workshop, the show that's all about photography, not about gear, teaching you how to maximize the power of your digital SLR camera. I'm your host Steven Zeller, and on our third episode we're going to talk about how to get sharp shots. Alright, in the last couple of episodes we've covered some of the basic camera functions, how to operate your camera, some different modes that you can use to get the kind of shot that you're after. And today I want to talk about how to get sharp shots. That's what we're all after. Everybody likes a tack sharp photo, as we say in the photography world. Not everybody's a fan of those. Sometimes if we want to be artistic or creative, we want to intentionally blur our photos, but for the most part, we're after a very sharp shot. So today, talk about a couple of different ways that we can do that, a couple of different methods, and a couple of different tools that you can use to achieve those nice and sharp photos. All right, now I know we say that this show is not about gear, and we're not. I'm here to tell you gear is not all that important. There are a few things that you are going to have to eventually acquire in order to do certain things, but we're not going to focus on the type of gear or whatever else. I'm going to show you some of the best options available that you can use to make great photos and not have to worry about spending a ton of money, okay? And but we can't avoid that stuff altogether, okay? We really can't. So one of the first things we'll talk about today in our quest to get sharp shots is having a tripod. A tripod does a lot of things for you. For one, it gives you the chance to set your camera on a stable platform. It's typically not moving, maybe a little bit with the wind if it's really windy out, but it's a nice, secure, stable platform. You set your tripod up, put your camera on top, and you can take some very sharp photos just by using that. Tripods you can pick up anywhere from about 20 bucks all the way up into the thousands of dollars. I'd show you mine, but the camera that's recording this podcast is what's being supported by my tripod, so I can't show it to you, unfortunately. But there's different ways you can go. There's aluminum leg tripods, there's carbon fiber leg tripods, those are the more expensive models. And there's a couple of different types of heads. There's tilt and pan heads, which are what you typically see a video camera sitting on top of. And then there's also the ball heads, which is basically a ball and socket type of platform that allows you to really move your camera around and get it set up. You can get into some of these setups for about 100 bucks to get into a decent tripod and a decent ball head and be well on your way to taking really sharp photos and not have to worry about your camera moving or things like that. Now, when is it important to have a tripod? There are some times when it's really important, like for instance if you're shooting in situations where it's really low light. You'll definitely want to have a tripod because your shutter speed is going to be very slow. Unless you're using extremely fast glass or lenses that have a very wide aperture like f1.4 or f1.2, if you're a Canon shooter, some of their lenses are really great. You're going to need a tripod. And so by using that in low light, it'll help you get sharp shots. Okay, another opportunity where you're going to want to use a tripod would be if you're doing, say, still life. Or product photography. It's a great time to use a tripod because you get your camera nice and stable, and if you're not using flash, if you're using natural light, something that's not going to freeze any movement that you have, you're definitely going to want a tripod. Landscapes, another great opportunity for a tripod to get that nice and sharp photo. Another time that I like to use tripods is shooting flowers. If I'm out somewhere and I see a great flower, I'll definitely grab my tripod if I have the opportunity to set it down and get a really nice shot, very well composed, and it's nice and stable. Humans, we're just going to tend to move around. There's no way to avoid it. If you're getting down to shutter speeds below about a 60th of a second, it's going to be really hard to keep your camera still and get a really sharp photo without having a tripod. Sometimes I've gotten lucky as low as 1/15th of a second, but my hands shake a little bit, and so if I'm below a 60th of a second, the chances of me getting a sharp shot just really aren't there. So a tripod's always good to have. So that's the first thing that's going to be important in your ability to be able to get really sharp photos, is having a tripod that you can use. Okay. Another option, if you don't have a tripod and you've got a digital SLR that has a continuous mode on it, you can use that. Now, what do I say when I say continuous mode? Well, most cameras have a couple of different types of shooting modes that you can use. Even cameras as low as the D40, which is a very entry-level digital SLR, it's even got a continuous mode that shoots 3 frames per second. Now, what does that mean? Continuous mode, if I hold down the shutter, it will continue to release until I fill up the camera's buffer or memory that's used to store photos while they're being written to the memory card. So in single shot mode, basically all I do is I point my camera at an object, camera focuses, and click, right? I get one shot per shutter depression, all right? When I go to continuous mode, on my D90 here, I'll move it up to continuous high, and that's going to shoot at a rate of 4.5 frames per second. So again, hold my camera, focuses on an object, and it shoots continuously until I let go of the shutter button. Now, how's that going to help you get sharp shots? If you're in a situation where you've got a lot of movement, like say you're taking pictures of kids, or if it's a little bit lower in light, you don't have a whole lot of light, what you can do is you can focus on your subject and use that continuous mode, because even if there's a little bit of camera shake, say you take 5 or 6 shots, more than likely 1 out of those 5 or 6 is going to be nice and sharp. So continuous mode will help you get great shots and sharp shots, and it's available to you without having any extra gear, without having any extra accessories or a tripod or anything like that. So that'll help you get very sharp photos. It's a great feature, and I use it pretty much all the time. Most of the time my camera is left in continuous mode. Another way to help you get very sharp photos is using manual focus. Okay, autofocus is great, but if you're shooting something that's sitting still, like a landscape, or if you're shooting product or still life, using manual focus can really help you get very sharp photos. Autofocus is great, but it doesn't work all the time. Sometimes you can get a misfocus and whatnot. So if you have the opportunity to use manual focus, it will again help you get very sharp shots. Now, another thing that I don't have here that will also help you out is called a cable release. And what a cable release does is it connects to the camera. For example, the D90 has a section here on the side where I can connect up USB cable release to this camera. And what a cable release does is when I release the shutter via the cable, I'm not physically touching the camera. So say I have it set on a tripod, and that's primarily when you're going to use a cable release. I have my camera sitting on a tripod, and I have my cable release, and I press the button. There's no physical movement to the camera itself. So the camera's sitting on the tripod nice and stable. I'm not touching it, so I'm not inducing any vibration into the camera at all. Cable releases can be had for anywhere between 40 to 50 bucks to $200 or $300, depending on how fancy a one you want to get. The main thing is you want to make sure that if you do get a cable release, you get one that's compatible with your camera, as not all of them will be. And some of the cable releases use a PC sync port, which my camera doesn't have on the D90. But it does have that USB port, and Nikon makes USB cable releases that I can use on that type of camera. Okay, so those are a few things that'll help you get sharp shots, which are important. You know, nobody wants a blurry photo unless they're trying to intentionally do it, as I mentioned earlier. So you can take those, use them, try them out, experiment. And if you have any questions on tripods or any questions on cable releases, feel free to hit us up in the comments on the DSLRworkshop.com, and we'll be happy to answer those questions for you, all right? All right, so let's talk about another thing. We were talking about gear, and I mentioned how my camera was being supported by my tripod that's taping this podcast as we speak. You know, the DSLR Workshop, I created it to help photographers learn more about photography without spending any money. There's some great online training resources, and not that I don't recommend any of those, because there are some really good ones out there. I just wanted to create an avenue where people who are just getting into digital SLR photography or just bought their first DSLR can find a place to go and learn some of the basics, learn some of the fundamentals of getting great shots. Okay, I shoot this podcast in my garage. I use a couple of homemade fluorescent lighting setups that I use with umbrellas and some $6 fluorescent bulbs from Home Depot and some extension cords. It's nothing fancy. I use an external audio recorder, and I use a Flip Minnow HD video camcorder to be able to record the show. It's pretty simple. I do all the editing myself and do everything in-house. So I try and focus on things that are attainable to real people. To people, well, I don't want to say real people, but to people like you and I who, you know, don't make a ton of money. Unless you're a doctor or a lawyer and you make a lot of money and can afford to buy, you know, the best of everything, you're not going to be able to. And so I wanted to give you this shot to see some of the more simpler ways to do things and just learn about photography. Okay, so we're not going to talk about gear. It's really not all that important. I'll show you some things. I'll show you some homemade things along the way throughout some of our episodes, and I'll show you ways that you can improve your photography for little to no money at all. Really, because it's about getting really good shots. It's not about the gear. It really doesn't matter. All right, so the last thing I'm going to leave you with is a tip for the road. And what this tip is for taking photographs of kids. Okay, one of the worst things that you can do as a photographer is shoot down on kids. And why do I say that? And by saying that, I do mean, you know, taking your camera, looking down at a kid that's standing up and taking a shot. As adults, we walk around and we see kids like that all the time. That's the perspective we see them in. So instead of shooting down on kids, try getting on their eye level. Get down on your knees, sit down on the floor, take shots of them from that perspective, and I guarantee you right off the bat, you'll get more interesting photos that way. All right, we'll talk more about that in another episode. Hope you've enjoyed the show so far. If you have any questions, leave them for us in the comments. We'd be happy to take any suggestions or questions that you have about equipment, about photography in general. I'll answer them for you, and I might even take one of those and use it for its own episode. So look forward to future episodes. Hope you guys will join us. And thanks for coming along for the ride on our third episode here on the DSLR Workshop. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/the DSLR Workshop. So don't forget you can follow us on Twitter there. You can also follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/the DSLR Workshop, and also our website, theDSLRworkshop.com. All right, so that's it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next time. Take care.